Welcome back, guys, to the Ace for Waves podcast with your host, Annabelle Schneider. Today's going to be a very, I want to say special episode, but it's going to be kind of more of an interesting episode. I think I mentioned this a few episodes ago with the main stuff that I was going to be doing a new segment on the podcast soon. And it's a segment that I think is going to be really fun to kind of talk about, fun to, dive into. And I want to also kind of show a little bit more of just, me as a person instead of the person who talks about sports all the time. Even though I love talking about that stuff, I want to give some more, life advice and talk about life skills as not just a college student, but also technically as an adult. I'm in my early 20s, so I'm still very young and still have much to learn. I really don't think you truly become an adult when you're 18. I think the age where I feel like people truly become adults is when you're like 23 or 24, right after you graduate college. So if you turn 18 and people are already calling you an adult, you're still very young. You still have a lot of years ahead of you to learn basic adult stuff. And I'm still learning basic adult stuff in my 20s. And that's what I'm going to call this new segment of the podcast. It's called Life Advice. But since life advice is very commonly used, we call this A plus advice. Just advice from me, Annabelle. I'm just going to talk about basically life skills that I think we should all have. Some skills are a little bit more complicated and a little more, I think, trickier than other skills are. But aside of life skills, I'm just going to be offering you guys advice and my opinions and my viewpoints on certain things. But before we begin, you can probably tell that I'm wearing sunglasses here. It's not for fashion, but it's a very nice day out today. So get outside, get some fresh air if it's warm wherever you are at. I have my windows open right now in my dorm and it's very sunny. So like when I take these off, I'm almost looking directly into the sun. And I don't want to be blinking because I have a problem with that. So these are just the sunglasses to kind of block out the sun from my window and the sun coming through there. And also, so I'm not squinting my eyes as much and causing a distraction to you guys. I find that when I blink, it's a distraction for me, and I don't want to be a distraction for you because it can get very bad at times when I notice the blinking a little bit too much. But so today's topic, it's called of my A plus advice for you guys. It's fears that adults have, but it's life skills that I think we all kind of fear at one point. It's not, basic fears like the fear of animals or the fear of heights, the fear of water, that kind of stuff. I know that there's people who do have those fears, and I feel you on that. I too have some a very mild fears of animals and heights and stuff, so I'm not discrediting those fears at all. They're very much valid, and I know that there's people who really do struggle with that to the extreme. But these are just, life skills that adults should learn and should have. But it's also stuff that I think we're a bit too afraid to admit that we have a fear of and stuff that we might not be good at. So I'm going to talk about those life skills that we adults fear and kind of where I stand on those things and how we can kind of overcome that. So the first skill that adults fear, communication. And this is a bit of I want to say more of an interesting realm for me. Communication is obviously key in any part of life, whether it be in a work setting, like a job, whether it be, with family stuff, with relationships, romantic relationships, dating, friendships. you need to have communication wherever you go. And as for me specifically, communication has been something that I have struggled with before I turned 18, but it was definitely around, the age of 16, 17, and 18 where it kind of started to come to light that I might have a communication problem. And we've, I think we get in our heads too much of what could possibly go wrong when we have to, meet with somebody, whether that be like a higher up, whether that be meeting with parents, meeting with teachers, meeting with just any adult. We have the fear of going to that person and then trying to hold a conversation with them and communicating our thoughts and feelings without, judgment. And as as I've learned in college specifically, if you don't communicate something right away and put it off, it's only going to get worse. And I've found that out the hard way at times when I would not communicate something that was either bothering me or that I had a lot on my mind. And I had the thought in my head that it was going to all go away and I could make it better on my own. And that's not necessarily true. So we just don't do well in environments where we have to meet one-on-one with people, or we have to meet in groups and we have to go to these meetings where communication is expected of us. And one way to get over, the fear of communication is, first of all, you have to do it. I know it sounds very basic and it sounds, very straightforward, but if you put off communicating with somebody and then you think that it's going to get better and you just don't want to do it, it's not going to get better. I think it's making it worse for yourself and with the group and or person that you're trying to meet with and communicate your stuff with. If you put it off, it's only going to continue to build up in there before it finally explodes, and then everyone is on the end of the miscommunication route. So communication is key. You have to do it. You just have to overcome it. Advice I have for overcoming the fear of communication is um, deep breaths. If you struggle with the anxiety of talking to people or communicating with people, just take a few slow, deep breaths. You can breathe, in for 2 seconds and then let out a big exhale and then repeat those steps until you feel a place of calmness or you feel a place of zen. And then try not to overthink too much. I have definitely overthought stuff when I've had to go and talk to people and I'm in my head of what can go wrong will go wrong. That's not a healthy way to think. If you're thinking about all the bad stuff that could possibly happen, you're not letting your mind think of what good could come out of communication. Maybe the person you're communicating with is on the same page as you. And then it becomes an open conversation of, let's talk about our thoughts on these things. Let's talk about our feelings in a healthy and safe way. Let's not put the barrier between us where you're not really allowing yourself to feel and think the way the other people are trying to make you feel or think. So I'd say deep breaths to kind of calm yourself down before communication. Obviously, trying to go in there with a healthy mindset. Try not to get into your head too much. And then just do it. The more I've learned how to communicate, the better I think I have gotten. I'm not saying that my communication is on par with like a lot of people. I still have a lot of work to do in that realm when it comes to communication in school and workplaces and just life in general. But It will take time, but it will, slowly start to get better the more you do it. But I think that is one of the most common fears that adults have is communication. And there's kind of some advice that I would offer in that aspect. Another fear that adults have, I think, when it comes to life skills is the fear of saying no. And I've heard this great quote one time that no is like the strongest yes you could possibly give someone, even though the words mean kind of the polar opposite. Saying no to something does not make you a bad person. And we as humans have the perception that when you say no, it means that you either dislike someone, it means that you're not interested. And I think what holds us back from saying no at times is that we're afraid of disappointing or letting someone down. There are times where if you just say no for the fun of it and you don't really think it through that much, then I do consider that, kind of as you not really taking the time or understanding how someone else might be affected by that. But saying no is completely healthy. If you are asked or put into an uncomfortable situation and you don't feel comfortable doing it, it's okay to say no for your personal self. It's okay to say no if your boundaries are being crossed. Nobody gets to dictate how you feel if you're not feeling safe, if you're not feeling comfortable, and if it's just not authentically you. I have also had trouble with saying no at times, but in a completely, opposite way. I will, my first instinct when someone asks me to maybe do something that I'm not really, that's not really what I want to do, I will just blurt out no immediately without thinking through how to word it in a more proper way. That has gotten me into trouble sometimes, but if I have a lot going on my plate and someone asks me to do a task or something, I still get the fear of letting that person down or letting myself down by potentially ruining the vibe. So I feel obligated to just say yes and get it over with. I think that saying no, once again, saying no does not make you a bad person. Again, you need to know your boundaries. You need to know if what you're comfortable doing, if it's authentically you, and just being aware of your surroundings. If you're put in a situation where something seems a little bit fishy, it's okay to say no for your safety. Again, saying no does not make you a bad person. It just means that you're looking out for yourself. And maybe you're looking out for others too when you don't want to do something that could potentially hurt other people that you care about. So, I, again, I want to kind of reinforce this. Even though saying no does not make you a bad person, there are times and there are situations where if you say no for the fun of it and you don't think it through, I wouldn't say that it makes you necessarily a bad person, but you're also just blurting something out on instinct without taking the time to really think it over. So my advice for those people who have trouble saying no is that it is okay if the more you say no for, yourself, I think the more you're gonna slowly feel comfortable in saying it. But again, just be aware of your surroundings, be aware of what makes you uncomfortable. And again, just look out for other people and look out for yourself, most importantly. Your safety is obviously at the hands of a lot of people that you surround yourself with, and it's also in the hands of yourself. If you are throwing yourself out there into a situation where you know it's dangerous and you know that it's a bit tricky, but you're going to do it anyway. Just be aware of stuff. Don't try to go and prove a point to people by doing something that you're not entirely safe or comfortable doing. So I think that's just adding on to their egos and adding on to your ego of, well, I can prove that I can do this, but at what cost? And now the third thing that we fear as adults, emotional intelligence. Now, this is, I don't know how to describe this, but emotional intelligence is where you are aware of the stuff surrounding your emotions. Let's ignore the intelligence part for a second, but let's just talk about emotions. I know we live in a society where we are expected to think and feel a certain way around people, and we are expected to think and feel a certain way about life in general, in society. Men have the notion that they are supposed to be big and strong and that crying makes them weak. Women have the notion of, well, breakups and any little thing that can go wrong will make them burst into tears immediately, and they're not as strong as men. I think those are very well myths, or well, not just myths, but everyone deals with emotions. It's okay to show emotion. Showing emotion does not make you weak. It just means that you have feelings like any other person on earth, basically. But it's how we deal with our emotions is where the emotional intelligence comes in. Sometimes people deal with emotions by releasing out anger. Sometimes people deal with emotions by swallowing themselves in misery and just not talking to people at all. For me, and I think for more specifically college students, we have trouble talking about our emotions with friends and with the adults in our proximity. Show emotions can build up in any circumstance. We can have emotions from dealing with the fallouts of friendships. We can deal with emotions from the fallouts of dating or relationships, the stress of school, the expectations surrounding school, where we go, after graduating from university and stuff. There's a lot that can build up emotion in us, but it's how we deal and let out those emotions from and what we let people see from us. If you're when people have walls, and sometimes those walls are very high and very hard to break for certain people. Other people's walls might be really low, and it takes a lot to, break them and let them show you what they are truly feeling. And there's some people who fall into the middle where they have these walls. It might be a little bit harder to break those walls, but it's going to come within time. It's not going to take, months or years to get that person to break their walls. But for dealing with emotions, the advice I have is talk it out with somebody. It doesn't have to be, if you don't want it to be with an adult, it doesn't have to be with an adult. But talk about it if you have a friend or a person that you trust. When you talk about your feelings, you're letting out this relief of fresh air that you don't even know that you needed. I think talking stuff out in general is a very healthy way of letting go of your emotions without letting them all pent up and then, just unleashing in the blink of an eye. When you let those emotions, well up with you over weeks, days, or months, and then you reach your breaking point. The breaking point is not going to be fun for you. It's not going to be fun for the people or the person that you're around when it does, ultimately come crashing down. Talking out, talking out emotions, talking out feelings again is not just a one gender thing. We have, again, society has made us think that women are the emotional people, but it's a two-way street. Men and women can be as equally emotional as they can. But for men, if you are feeling emotional and you're feeling that you need to talk about stuff, definitely talk about it. Again, it doesn't make you a bad person if you're feeling a certain way. Just know that there are millions of other people who might be feeling the same way as you. And it's not just you. It's not a problem that you have. It's not a disease if you can't talk about your emotions because it makes you a bad person. When you talk about stuff, it's again, it's a relief of fresh air. And I feel like you just slowly let yourself loose in the best way possible. Another way to kind of deal with emotions and with people who have the higher emotional intelligence and maybe others is do something that you love. I know that's easier said than done, but find a hobby that you truly enjoy and that you can just lose yourself in. That could be either like running, if you like to run, it could be walking, it could be gardening, it could be yoga, drawing, painting, reading, writing, exercising, weightlifting, just any hobby in the world that you can think of that you truly like, and let yourself be invested in that. You're kind of taking the stress off your mind when you're doing so, and then you're at your calmest and you're at your happy place. And that's something that I've done when I'm feeling those emotions and those feelings building up, is where if I know that I can't be out in public right now because one little thing will set me off, then I go to a hobby that I truly enjoy and is a stress reliever. Sometimes that's just reading a book. Sometimes that's writing. Sometimes it's another thing. But I'm doing the thing that I like and that I have an interest in. But once I get involved and once I stick to that for about 20 or 30 minutes, I forget what I was feeling in that moment, but I also feel like my emotions kind of left my body. So again, to recap, dealing with emotional intelligence or the fear of dealing with emotions, my advice is just to talk to somebody that you trust. Talking it out, I feel like could be maybe the best solution possible, because other people can give you some advice and can kind of help you deal with what you're going through, or find a hobby or an interest that you are passionate about or like, and let yourself be enveloped in it. Number 4 of things that adults fear, it says one specific thing, but I'm gonna kind of go on to the broader reach of stuff, which is paying bills, but more specifically, paperwork. Now, paperwork, for me at least, is something that I think I've kind of developed a tiny fear of once I reached my early 20s, which is what I kind of am at the moment right now. But when you become an adult, suddenly you're thrown with all sorts of paperwork. That could be bills, paying bills. That could be tax forms. That could be medical forms. That could be paperwork that people make you fill out when you go off to school. I remember having a lot of paperwork when I first moved into the dorms, and I was left feeling very overwhelmed and had that fear of, oh my gosh, I'm gonna write the wrong thing down because I'm in my head. I have the anxiety of giving out misinformation where I know almost everything that they are asking me to write down or fill out. Paperwork, just like with communication, it's something that you're going to have to do. You can't necessarily put off paperwork as an adult. If you do put that off, I think you're finding yourself in a cycle where you're gonna have bills, you're gonna have taxes, you're gonna have all this stuff keep piling up and up and up, and you're gonna find yourself in either debt, you're gonna find yourself in a situation where your financial stuff might not be as, you know, evenly balanced as it once was. But just like with communication, you just gotta do it. I know it can be a very scary thing having to deal with a lot of paperwork or very minimal paperwork, but there are people out there with like parents, grandparents, teachers, and stuff, if you're a young adult like me, who have obviously dealt with their fair share of paperwork over the years. So if you have questions about paperwork, again, just ask somebody. Chances are they're going to know the answer to these things. I remember filling out tax forms for the first time, and it was very daunting and very scary because there was a bunch of numbers and information out there, but I had to, overcome my fear of going and asking for help by saying, "Hey, I don't know what this thing means. Can you help me understand it?" And it was not the end of the world for me, even though I did go through that thought cycle of, oh my gosh, they're going to think I'm stupid. They're going to think I'm dumb. They're going to think that I don't know how to handle basic paperwork. But it all worked out. If you have questions about bills, ask, parents or grandparents who have paid their bills before. Ask them early on. I'd say the best way to, overcome the fear of paperwork is by getting an early start on it. So maybe that's watching your parents pay bills or just having them walk you through the basic steps of it. I know for me in high school, there was a personal finance class and we learned just very basic finance stuff. I'm talking like the basic way how to fill out W-2s and W forms and with tax returns and stuff like that. We didn't go very in depth about it. That was the class that I took as a senior. I'm not saying that the class was bad. I've definitely learned a lot of stuff in personal finance, but I do wish that I had learned those skills maybe earlier as a junior. Waiting until your senior year to teach seniors about finance before they go off to college, I don't know. It just didn't feel, right to me. I think if I had learned that stuff as a junior and then just added on to what I had already learned as a senior before stepping out into the real world and stepping into college experiences may have been a little bit better, not just for me, but for all of my graduating seniors. But again, I can't really talk down on that. Personal finance is absolutely one of the most, I won't say like the most interesting, but it was very educational. I learned a lot in personal finance, and it is a class that I think all high schools should offer, if they don't already offer it. Pay attention in your personal finance classes or any finance class. That is absolutely one skill that you are going to need and you're going to use in life. Obviously you're going to use math in your life forever, whether that be, algebra or calculus or just basic addition or subtraction. Math is one of the core subjects in school that you're going to take with you forever. And same with ELA. You're going to have to write papers in college. You might have to write papers in a job where writing out stuff is a main thing for you. Reading, I think reading is a little bit more less than writing, but it's still an important skill to learn and to have, even whether it be reading books, reading textbooks, reading, paperwork. Math and ELA are my two core subjects that I'm going to take with me for the rest of my life. And same with personal finance. I think science and social studies you will definitely use in your life, but not just as much as those other subjects. But That's for my advice on paperwork, is if you don't understand it, again, ask for help. Or there's also this thing called the internet. The internet can offer you stuff too. I don't know how, accurate it may be, but just I'd say just look up a sample of a W-4 and kind of familiarize yourself with it. Even if you don't understand it, at least you know kind of what it looks like. The same can be said for W-2s, wherever you're from. So I know we call it W-4s and W-2s, I think in Iowa. Other states might have different names for it, but whatever your state you're in, look up a sample of a tax form and then skim it over. At least you know what it looks like, and at least you know the areas that the government is asking you to fill out. But that's my advice on paying bills and paperwork in general. The last fear, the last fear that we have as adults with life skills is obviously the fear of being criticized and receiving open criticism. There's constructive criticism, and then there's just criticism in general. When it comes to criticism, we have the fear again of, well, this person or these people are going to tell me what I did bad at, and they're not going to tell me what I did good at. That might be true in certain situations, and I definitely don't really I wouldn't say it's it, but I don't really, understand why people tell other people what they did bad at without offering at least some form of praise. But again, there's going to be criticism wherever you go in life. And you're going to receive criticism at your jobs. You're going to receive criticism in school. You're going to receive criticism from just people. And criticism doesn't mean that you were awful in a job interview, for example. If you're in a job interview and it didn't go well, they're going to tell you, the person in charge of the interview might tell you that, hey, I understand you might have been a little bit nervous. I understand that you might have, kind of tensed and froze up in the moment. I understand that. Here are a few tips and some advice that I would give you to help you do better in your next job interview. That's constructive criticism, where they're acknowledging that you might not have went into it as you were hoping to. They recognize that, but they're also going to give you some advice and some tips on how you can be better prepared the next time. Again, that doesn't mean that you are an awful person. That does not mean that you are a failure. It doesn't mean that does not make you, a terrible human being if you go in and you totally bomb a job interview or you totally bomb a test in school. You just have to work maybe a little bit harder next time, take what the people are telling you to heart, and then going out there and using that criticism to your advantage. One of some of the constructive criticism that I have received in just life in general is learning how to maintain eye contact with people. I am a very introverted person. I think I've talked about that before, but I truly don't do well in social settings. I will freeze up if someone asks me a question on the spot. It might take me a moment to register what that person is telling me, and then I'm trying to form a response in my mind. But by the time I find the words to say what I want to say, I feel like it is too late and that person is judging me. And then my eyes are kind of darting all the way across the room. So I don't want to look that person in the eye for the fear that I'm going to see judgment and I'm going to see resentment. So, and not just in social settings, that could be said the same, that could be said in the same way for me when I'm growing up and giving a presentation in class. I will try to avoid eye contact as much as possible with the people because I don't want to accidentally lock eyes with someone and see that, the judgment that I might have been feeling or I might have been thinking in my mind. I'd say my advice for that specifically is pick out a certain area. If you're giving a presentation, pick out a certain area in the room to lock eyes on, whether that be an object such as a poster or a window, or looking at the foreheads of people. That is some of the criticism that I got in speech in high school is when I admitted that I have trouble looking people in the eye. Look at their heads or look at their foreheads. You're still looking at that person, but you're not really making the direct eye contact with someone. And that could be said the same in just in a conversation or just a social setting in general. Pick out something that you can keep your eyes on while it looks like you're still keeping that eye contact with that person. Again, with criticism, it's meant to help you get better and it's meant to help you succeed in life. If people didn't offer us criticism, we wouldn't learn what we might not be the best at, but we can definitely work on it and improve it so we can get to that point where we feel comfortable doing something that made us uncomfortable or that we didn't really do the best at the first glance. And with that, I'm put these, it's starting to get light again, so I'm gonna put these back on. But there's some A+ advice from me, guys. I hope you enjoyed this little segment. I'm gonna be doing a little bit more of these things, but this was just fears that adults have in life skills. I know I plan to do some more A+ advice with friendships, with relationships, and life skills that we should have, such as cooking, doing laundry, stuff that assumptions when it comes to college students and their expectations, just a lot of different areas that I hope to kind of branch out and talk about. So with that, we are going to conclude the Ace for Waves podcast for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.